Planner, Tricia Mason, Community Development Manager, Kimberly Adam, Administrative Specialist. And we also have our alternate board commissioners joining us with it today, Mr. Steve Douglas, Angela Van Dijk, and Garrett Bitloff. So welcome for listening for us as well tonight. So, and all the members with us present. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Kim, can you please call a vote?
Of course. Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Ingram,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
Chairman Popio.
Yes. The motion to approve the minutes has passed by a motion of 5 yeses, 0 noes. Mr. Hayter, can you please introduce our first case of the evening?
Of course, tonight's first case is CU-121-19-21. A1 Organics is requesting a renewal of a conditional use permit, which allows for the storage of wood chips and mulch piles up to 25 feet in height for the property located at 9109 Monaco Street, zoned I2, medium density industrial district. The existing conditional use permit was granted in June of 2019 for a term of 18 months.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter.
And I'm sorry, yes, Mr. Dominic Marnelli will be presenting the case on behalf of the city. Excuse me, Dominic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hayter. So I will be going ahead and sharing my screen and giving that presentation tonight. So as you all know, this is a relatively familiar case. You all saw this not too long ago in terms of conditional use permits and review and things of that nature. So this is the renewal of the existing conditional use permit to allow material pile storage of up to 25 feet in height. The applicant is A1 Organics and the address is 9109 Monaco Street. So the subject property is zoned I2. So you can see that it kind of sits, it's relatively opposite of an enclave. So it's an exclave to the city where this was annexed previously, and ultimately this property is surrounded entirely by unincorporated Adams County. To the south is an aggregate mining operation that's occurring in the county. To the west are water quality ponds that are maintained by the city of Thornton. So that occurs to the west and the north. And then there are some adjacent large lot residential uses to the east in unincorporated Adams County. So this is generally fairly close to the intersection of US 76 and 88th Avenue. So as Mr. Hayter alluded, this is zoned I2. The site size is 31 acres. It fronts along Monaco Street. And the floodplain does encroach on the western bound of the property, but this facility went through the letter of map revision process back in 2014, which removed the site from the floodplain. So just to kind of show you, this is a recent aerial image that was taken towards the end of last year. So you can see that the operation is essentially split into 2 separate operations. Brown Brothers Trucking operates the building on the east side of the facility and some of the adjacent storage area. And then the operations for A1 Organics occupies the rest of the site. So there is a significant drop off of around 30 to 35 feet from the front. So once you're on street level at Monaco, once you drive into the facility, you drop down pretty extensively, about 30 to 35 feet where you got to that point. We did talk a little bit about the mining facility. And because of the characteristics of the site, so this was previously used as the Baroda landfill up until about 2002. There is a significant history in limiting of the types of uses that can occur on this property due to the inert landfill past. So ultimately it prevents significant structures from being placed underground and a number of remediation that would need to occur for that thing. So soil quality is a major issue in facilitating development. So the future land use plan generally calls us out for general industrial. Ultimately, you can see a little bit of difference in the map, but that general industrial spirit is sort of contained now that that's been removed from the floodplain. So this was annexed into Commerce City in 1993. The Baroda landfill, I'm sorry, it closed in 2013. So it operated from 2002 to 2013. And then just to provide some backgrounds, there were various land use approvals previously for an RV storage and parking facility, which didn't come to fruition. And then the development plan was amended in late 2015 to allow A1 Organics to operate on the site. So 2016 through present, they've been currently in operations, and there are a number of land use applications that were processed by the city. The height exception case for the increase in the pile height ultimately was denied by the Board of Adjustment, but the conditional use permit and development plan were approved in 2019 for this use. Excuse me. The applicant is A1 Organics, which is a waste recycling company that converts organic material into mulch, compost, soils, and mulches for sale to the public, and has been in business in 1974. So they do have a number of operations in Colorado, and ultimately this type of use has positive environmental benefits in terms of reducing landfill diversion. So taking tree limbs and other organic material that would otherwise end up in a landfill and converting it into some sort of product or reuse ultimately has environmental benefits to the community. So in terms of the way that their operations work, they do, because of how the wood chips and the wood piles sort of work in ambient temperatures, increasing the pile heights allows for more efficient use of space on the property and reduces the amount of wood chips and that would blow and debris. So the larger piles keep them moist and prevents additional dust mitigation. So this is just another map showing the topography. We did provide an image just showing how, as you drive down to the facility, you're kind of sloping. And then we've got a contour map showing how big that drop off is from the developed site from Brown Brothers, and then ultimately once you get to the organics facility. So the way that the operations work on site, and the applicant is here tonight to speak, the recycled wood products are converted into mulch and topsoil on site. So the wood, the organic materials are either provided by individual customers or large shipments. So ultimately they take this material, grind it up, and then dye the mulch on site, and then deliver that off-site to commercial sale. So the way that this works, and there's conditions that we'll cover later on in the presentation, about incoming product and grinding operations occurring in the southwest corner of the site, and then the raw wood chip storage, and then the dyeing of the mulch happens on the northeast side of the facility. So the volume and inventory on their site typically fluctuates on a seasonal basis depending on when the demand is highest, that being January through March, to make sure that product's available at the time that mulch is typically used during landscape projects during the summer. The piles end up fluctuating between 8 to 15, and they provide different mulch colors that are and things of that nature. One of the initial comments that we received from the fire department is South Adams County Fire Protection District is that there needs to be 25-foot drive aisles kept clear at all times for adequate fire access and site circulation. And then they ultimately have 4 inbound and outbound trucks per day. So just to kind of highlight how all of this functions within the approved development plan and site plan. So the wood waste receiving and storing and chipping occurs on kind of the lower left-hand corner of the facility. And then the raw wood chips are generally stored in the middle of the facility, and then the dyeing equipment and dyed product is more towards the northeast side of the facility. And then you'll see drive aisles delineated and things of that nature. As part of the improvements, we'll get into this a little bit later, but they were required to put up an 8-foot high black mesh net on the east and kind of northeast corner of the facility, as well as paving the recycled asphalt drive aisle on the northeast side of the facility, and then placing a demarcation pole to provide an assistance with enforcement, as well as actually physically delineating where the 500-foot setback is for grinding and screening operations. So this is just another map showing the circulation and fire access that occurs on site. And then some additional aerial imagery. And then just some photos of the mulching equipment, how they operate on site. And then just a photo of some of the new site improvements. The stacking machine set to 25 feet height maximum. With the so basically, once they do the stacking of the piles, they have a limit of 25 feet that conveyor belt can increase to, and that ultimately controls pile heights and helps assist with that. You can see the fencing, and then they do maintain the east side with the recycled asphalt road base. The applicant has adequately demonstrated ongoing compliance with the conditions that were placed in the conditional use permit granted in 2019. Since the approval of the conditional use permit, there has been no formal enforcement actions that have actually been exercised by the city, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, or the EPA. And we have not received any formal complaints since the conditional use permit has been granted. So in addition to this, the applicant has installed all physical site improvements that were required in the conditions, which includes the demarcation pole, the recycled asphalt road base, and then the fence. And then they do, in operation in conjunction with their approved dust mitigation plan, they do provide daily weather logs and operational summaries demonstrating monitoring compliance of wind speeds. So they do have a wind monitor. And ultimately, when wind speeds exceed 15 miles an hour for a duration of 10 minutes or more, they shut down the screening and grinding operations, and then typically apply water on the mulch piles, and then magnesium chloride on internal access rounds, and then if necessary, actually put tarps over the stockpiles. So we covered this a little bit, but one of the other two items that we wanted to cover was the proposed 100-foot setback, so that they do have a setback for the residential properties to the east for the mulch piles, and then a 500-foot setback from the grinding and screening operations. There is one water quality pond located at the northwest corner of the site. And then they do provide a silt sock lining on the western border of the property between A1 and the undeveloped wetlands and the bottom of the dyed mulch piles to prevent leakage of dyed materials. So this does comply with all of the conditional use permit approval criteria, that it doesn't result in a substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent properties. Those effects have been mitigated to the maximum extent feasible. The characteristics of the site are suitable for the use. It's adequately served by existing improvements. The applicant has provided adequate assurances of continued maintenance. It does not violate any federal, state, or local laws, and there's a demonstrated community need for the use, and generally complies with the purposes, goals, and objectives of the city's comprehensive plan. So the development review team recommends the Planning Commission recommend to approve the requested conditional use permit, subject to conditions A through M, in its recommendation to City Council, ultimately due to the demonstration that they are in compliance and have relatively kept a low profile and haven't had additional complaints or issues arise during their 18-month initial permit trial period. So we didn't make a ton of changes to the existing conditional use permit criteria, but there is a couple items that we wanted to highlight. So the first one is the addition of condition A, which is a simple reference to the development plan that was approved. And then the conditional use permit would expire, recommending a 5-year expiration period for the renewal. And then all the conditions generally remain the same. And then just some language cleanup of, because they've already constructed the pole and the fence, just to continue to maintain those. And then required notification was provided as required by the Land Development Code. And then staff is available to answer any questions. So I'll be able to answer any specific questions about the presentation. And ultimately, we do have the applicants, Ryan McBreen from Norris Design, as well as some of the operational folks from A1 Organics to answer any more specific questions on their operations.
Thank you, Mr. Martinelli. First question, just timeline. Obviously, 18 months to 5 years is, pretty big step. What was the discussions with the applicants to determine that time frame and for the city to become comfortable with that recommendation?
So ultimately, the recommendation for 5 years is based on the existing conditions that were put in place, looking at continuing enforcement and things of that nature, and looking at the documentation that was provided. And ultimately, based on that, the city always does have the ability to revoke a conditional use permit if necessary based on non-compliance, but ultimately due to lack of ongoing issues and the information provided as part of the resubmittal in terms of demonstrating compliance with their conditions, ultimately the development review team felt comfortable recommending 5 years, which is typically a standard CUP duration and time frame. Ultimately, what happens is a recommendation of either 18 months, 5 years, or kind of ongoing, like where there's no specific expiration date. And that ultimately depends on the nature of the operations and things of that nature.
Okay. questions from the commissioners for Mr. Martinelli? Mr. Yost, I see your hand raised up earlier.
Yeah, there was some mention about an electronic way to load trucks. And there's also mentioned about how this is an improvement. Can you go into that, Dominic?
Yes, I'll just kind of briefly highlight that. But I would like the applicant to talk about it a little bit more as well.
Yeah, that's fine.
But basically, I believe that they do have an electronic system that assists with the unloading of wood chips and things of that nature, which prevents additional dust from migrating off the site. So they basically have a system that kind of weighs and makes sure that all of that is aligned.
Dominic,
Any further questions?
I have a question about last time that they came in, we had, I think, 2, maybe 3 citizens from around the general area make, a case that they would rather not have the 25-foot height. And I was just kind of curious. I think the applicant was going to make sure that they got with them and did what they could to make sure that they were comfortable with our decision. Have you had any contact with people after the posting, and did you have any contact with those people, a year and a half ago?
So ultimately, the city has not heard from the residents that were at the previous hearings. Ultimately, I'll leave it up to the applicant to discuss any specific conversations that they may or may not have had with the adjacent neighbors. But we haven't received any additional complaints or any additional communication from those parties.
Okay, Mr. Amador?
Dominic, has there been any, so you show a topographical survey of existing conditions from the original condition. When you drive by the site and you're, making a right turn off of 88th Avenue, it's very clear that the 25-foot, I believe it's 25 feet, at the fence line still maintains, but when you drop down into that site, there's a good 75 to 100-foot drop off outside of the dirt piles that are kind of shown to block the extraction of soils. Has there been a new topographical survey to show what the difference is between what was existing and what actually occurs today?
So you're, just to make sure I understand your question, you're talking about the landfill to the south?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so you show a topographical survey in our presentation. If we could go back to that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share my screen again. Give me 1 second.
And the question is, that topographical survey was before all of this extraction and everything. Actually, yeah, right there, see how it kind of shows the level of what was, I'm going to call it existing versus what is actually today. Do we have a actual versus what this topography shows? Like, how far down more did they go? Because it's way more than 25 feet. It's got to be at least 100.
Yeah, so you're correct ultimately, and that's a good catch. That ultimately on the south end, kind of just where my mouse cursor is, what would show up as significantly darker. So you can see this, it's really hard to see with, let me see if I can just represent this so it's larger on your screens. So ultimately the scale that we have on the side here is the wider the land is, it's close to 5,200 feet, and ultimately the darker it is black. So ultimately, if you're looking just kind of where my mouse cursor is, that would be significantly darker. So ultimately, and I'm not sure at this time like how frequently US topographic maps are updated, but I can certainly look into that just sort of as we're going through this and see if I can pull up an additional map. I know that they do frequent updates, and that data should be available.
Very good. I guess at the perimeter, we do meet the intent, and I understand that we have to, extract some of these materials and whatnot. And the concern from the community in the past, on first reading of this thing or presentation of the conditional use permit was about, I wasn't in full agreement. I'll put it that way. And then on the next time I was hunting, so the conditional use permit did pass. So I just kind of have some concerns because the community did come out and ask about, the air pollution that was happening. And yes, we meet 25 foot, but it's really sort of a burr under my saddle right now. That's why I ask about how far down have they dug?
Yeah, I can look into that and try to get back to you as we go through the presentation. So I'll do some digging on aerial maps and things.
Do some digging. Thank you.
Touche. Any further questions for Mr. Martinelli? And I think maybe the applicant might be able to address that too, Mr. Amador. See if he has some insight on that. Kim, can we please bring the applicant forward? I think Mr. McBreen has joined us today.
There he is.
Good evening, commissioners. How are you? As soon as I got joined in, everything moved around my screen, so give me one moment, please. Sorry. There we go. Hopefully you can see that.
Yes, we can.
All right. So we have a brief presentation and I'll get into that. So let me start real quick. Good evening. I'm Ryan McBreen with Norris Design, 1101 Bannock Street, Denver, Colorado. Before I dig into this real quick, Vice Chair Amador, I want to clarify a couple questions. Are you talking about our property digging down or the property adjacent to us where the mining is? Because we're not digging at all. So we have a development plan that's approved, it has grading, and we abided by that grading. It just creates a level ground. What we do is they're processing, they're recycling wood and mulch materials, and they're doing those piles on top of the existing grade. So there's no actual digging into the ground. We're not moving soil. We're not digging into the landfill or anything like that. If I understood kind of what you were asking or what you're going to there. I know this is not the appropriate time to do the question and back and forth, but I wanted to address that while it was fresh in my mind. Is that what you were asking, I guess?
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Yeah, there's no digging or anything like that. So I think this image on your screen tonight kind of perfectly kind of summarizes kind of what's going on out there. This is the view from 88th, Monaco, looking west towards through the Brown Brothers site, which is this green and cream building in front. And then you can see further on the A1 Organics operations further down in the back there. So you can see we're just piling materials on top of the existing grade. We're not, and those piles constantly are moved because they're shipping materials in and out. So, but just to clarify that point there. So first and foremost, thanks, Dominic. I know Dominic did a great job covering it. I don't want to repeat everything he just said, so I'll briefly gloss over a few items, but we wanted to reiterate a few points and hopefully address some of the concerns you all had tonight. I am joined tonight by Kent Penley and Travis Bonson of A1 Organics, and they can answer more operations questions, including the question about the electronic, the Commissioner Yost had about the filling operations there. So I'll defer to them at the end of this conversation for that. Like Dominic said, all we do is provide organic compost, soils, mulch, and organic recycling services. Diverted more than 350,000 tons of waste from Colorado landfills, which is pretty significant. It's family owned and operated since the 1970s, and there's 4 locations, also as Dominic pointed out. These pictures to the right kind of indicate what's going on there. The top demonstrates the machinery that does the grinding and screening of those materials, and the picture on the bottom shows the coloring of those materials there, like you go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy those type of different colored mulch. These folks are the ones that provide that for you. we've done tried and true best management practices. We've continued to maintain those practices through this last 18 months. And honestly, it's most of these items we have done since we started operations nearly 5 years ago out of this site. Once again, we shut down operations if sustained winds reach 15 miles per hour or higher for 10 minutes or more. And they have an ongoing, I think in your packets tonight is our ongoing hourly weather reports, that daily tracking of the weather and what's going on out there, which they'll continue to do. Water down and treat roads with mag chloride as needed on hot and windy days. They water material as it's grinded, which keeps the dust down. They equip the conveyors with dust skirts to direct the mulch directly onto the piles below. Operate grinding and screening on the west side of the site, furthest from the adjacent residential lots. And then regularly hire contractors to clean up trash that blows on site. The taller pile request was really important for us because the materials stay moist and compact in those bigger piles as opposed to smaller, wider piles, which makes them less sensitive to weather, wind, and erosion. It allows for more efficient use of space, allowing us to have the bigger setbacks like we have proposed. It's important to know that what we're doing out here isn't allowed use. We're just asking for the higher pile heights. This graphic in front of you is one we shared, I guess, a little over 18 months ago. It's almost 2 years ago when we first saw you all. Just to give you an idea of where the mesh is, where the recycled asphalt base is, where the 100-foot setback is. This says 75 for a certain part of the year. It's not, it's 100-foot year round. And then we have the 500-foot setback from residential to grinding and screening, as well as the demarcation pole. So, to show you, we just wanted to show you that this is what we promised to do and this is what we have done. I'm not going to read all this condition of approval, but as Dominic demonstrated, the conditions of approval for this application were exactly the same as that application. We have met all those conditions of approval, met or exceeded them, I should say, and we'll continue to meet those conditions through the next 5 years. As you can see in this picture here, it shows a watering truck watering down the roads. You can see the setback on the left, setback of the mulch piles, as well as the screen fence in place. Here's kind of a better picture of that screen fence that was placed. And this picture on the bottom is the same that Dominic shared earlier. This was taken last fall during the fire, so the picture's a little cloudy there. And you can see it's just a well-kept, well-maintained area. They enjoy working on this site. It's been a great location. It's been very successful for them, and they want to continue to be here in Commerce City and a good neighbor. So they're requesting the renewal of a 5-year extension. It gives them a little more peace of mind by allowing that 5 years. This is something we worked with staff to ask. What it does, it gives them some peace of mind and some assurances should they want to allow to reinvest and continue to improve the property. 5 years is a longer window. 18 months went really fast, right? Because I think all of you were here when we saw this 18 months ago. So a big thing with the 5 years is it's going to allow them a level of comfort to allow them to feel comfortable reinvesting in continue to improve the property in ways they think are better for the community and better for their business. So we appreciate staff support on this, and we ask for your support this evening. Like I said, Travis Bonson and Kent Penley are here on the call this evening as well. And Kent or Travis, would you mind weighing in? I think Kent was struggling getting on, so he may not be able to unmute himself, but maybe Travis, you could answer the question about the electronic loading materials before we kind of move on to questions and answers.
Cam, can we unmute?
I do not have the ability to change Kent's status or to unmute him. So I don't know what to do about that.
Can we do Travis?
Yes, I have promoted Travis, so I'm just waiting for him to connect.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Travis.
Let me start there we go. Hey guys, sorry about that. I wasn't quite sure. I didn't see any way to mute or video, so I wasn't sure if I could see you guys. And I think Kent had a hard time getting on the, he couldn't get his password to work. He texted me, he is on the call. So, but I think I can answer most of the questions unless they're very operationally specific. So if I could, I'd like to start with the question that Commissioner Yost asked about the electronic loading. There might be a little bit of confusion there. what we've done and to add to the site is we have a machine called Load Scan that we've added to that site. And that's really a tool to help measure the volume of the loads coming in and out of the site. So it's not really like an electronic type physical loading of the semis or anything like that, but it's a tool that we use as an improvement on site to better measure our product going in and out to customers.
So Travis, obviously, you know, a lot of conversation on, you know, the neighbor and the community with our last approval. How is that relationship, you know, going with your surrounding partners?
Yeah, you know, since the commission hearing, we have not had any communication from Perry, the neighbor over there. We were glad to hear that he has not made any formal complaints, and we have not seen any formal inspections, which are usually triggered by some type of complaint. I was out on the site today, actually, to go down and visit our staff there. We're getting geared up for the, you know, spring season. And so, you know, I went down to that side of the site. We are definitely maintaining the setbacks. The fence has been very helpful from when there is any type of higher type of wind. You know, really looking at the fence today, there's just no evidence of anything getting through that fence onto the other property. So I'm really hopeful that our neighbors there, really it was just one neighbor that we had an issue with, and we just haven't heard anything from him. And so I hope that's a good sign that he's accepted the improvements that we've done on the site and no longer feels, you know, like he did, I guess, before we asked for our first conditional approval.
Okay. Any, and I know Mr. Martinelli stated this, but I guess Ryan or Travis answered this. I mean, any known violations from your side that you've received from, whether it be a stormwater management plan, whether it be the Colorado Department of Health, obviously Commerce City?
No, we get monitored, you know, and, you know, this facility is a little different than maybe our, you know, and the other thing I wanted to mention, I guess, too, is that I think at Dominic's presentation very early, we do not manufacture any soil on site. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood our operation there, that we don't do any type of composting there. The only type of soil stuff that we do is just soil that we've brought to the site that we resell to residents and customers. So we do store that soil there as well. So we do not manufacture any type of compost there, but all of our sites that are composting sites were highly regulated by CDPHE, the Weld County Department of Health. Down in Denver, we're subject to air quality permits from both the county and the city. And we have had absolutely no issues at that facility since our last hearing.
Okay. Any big adjustments that you've made? I mean, your stormwater management plan, your dust control plan, all those were significant in our last review. I mean, any lessons learned or any adjustments that you made since that last time?
You know, we've definitely implemented everything that the commission recommended last time, and we feel like it's, you know, really been done what it was intended to do. And we were down there today, you know, just like Ryan laid out the site, all of the grinding stuff was clear far back from the residents as possible, you know, really a lot closer to the mining, the dirt and gravel mining operation that's next to us. And, you know, the colored mulches are set back from that fence there. And, you know, we really feel like the recommendations made last time, we're not here to ask for you to take any of those away. We're meeting all those recommendations. We keep accurate weather reports and documentation and shut down the site. We want to be a good neighbor to our residents next door. And so that's why I'm really encouraged that we haven't, you know, kind of no news is good news type of situation, that we haven't heard any complaints.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Travis. I mean, it's good to hear, that, some of the cooperation, some of the feedback that maybe we haven't heard this time that we heard last time. So I think some other commissioners had some questions as well. Mr. Yost. I think you're muted, Mr. Yost.
Yeah, thank you. You offer a recycle day for, and I'm not exactly sure what it entails, but I know you do offer, I've seen it in the paper where you offer a day where Commerce City residents can bring material to your property and have it recycled at no charge. Will you continue to do that during the 5-year period?
Yes, we do that with, we have a site down in Commerce City and Inglewood as well, and that's been an ongoing thing. And I apologize, I don't have the direct details, so I may be a little bit off on my information. Our marketing manager handles most of that, and I'm sure Kent, who might be having trouble, can give you the exact details too from the operational side, but it's actually 2 days in the spring and 2 days in the fall. And we work directly with Commerce City. Well, it'd be your recycling department, so it's a little different department than you guys, but we actually work with them on that program. And last year it was really successful. And we're hoping that this year there's even more residents that take advantage of that opportunity to bring it there and keep that wood and grass and leaf clippings out of the landfill.
And it is my understanding you will continue to do that during the 5-year period.
Oh, absolutely. We do it voluntarily. It's same with the city and town of Inglewood. We're not required to do it, but we feel it's the right thing to do in our community to really, and there is a little benefit to us. We hope that the residents that take advantage of it get to see our site, and if they have a need for mulch or further recycling, they come back and see us.
Thank you, Mr. Yost. Any further questions for the applicant from the commissioners?
Travis, do you sell retail off of your site?
I would say most of what we sell is wholesale. We do have residents that come in, and so all of those types of retail, any type of retail sales that we do charge and remit sales tax to the Commerce City and to the county. I'm not a sales tax expert, but I know we do that. And I mean, for a lot of what we do is a wholesale type business. So not everything we sell out of there is charged is sales tax chargeable at that location, because it's not the final sale to the retail market.
Okay. Any further questions from the commissioners? Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Travis, for your comment. I would now like to invite members from the public to speak. I do not believe we've had anybody signed up. Kim, can you please verify, or maybe one of the alternates? I see Mr. Douglas has raised his hand. Can we please unmute Mr. Douglas?
Good evening, commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas.
Thank you. And good evening to the representatives from A1 Organics. I was on city council back in 2019. I know it was already explained about the neighbors and the wind and how things were handled back then. I'm glad to hear that has been resolved. My question is, how many more 25 feet piles that you want to put on the property? I think there's 5 there now. And then will this 5 years will be a continuance from now, or will it be would it be concurrent with the 18 months that's already been part of the process? And then explain just how the neighboring property is being handled when there is really windy conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. I think, Mr. Martinelli, I mean, from a timing period, I think we stated in that is when the other one completes the 18-month, a new 5-year would commence. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, so basically, since it's a city council approval, this would be a resolution which is approved during the first reading with city council. I believe the effective date of the conditional use permit is either the day of or the day after the granting by city council. So it'll be 5 years from that point. I believe we have this scheduled, we'll go April 5th to city council.
Mr. Martinelli, can you confirm too the number of PALs that was on site? Was that, I mean,
So ultimately, this request it's not a request for additional piles or any more or any less. Ultimately, there was no limitation on the number of piles. It was only a regulation on the height of any individual pile. And based on the operations and what occurs on site, ultimately the amount of piles fluctuates depending on the season.
It's a new 5-year.
So during the summer and like going into fall, ultimately they don't have as many piles because they're not doing as much inventory volume. But ultimately, if you look at the drive aisles plus their operations plus how many physical piles you can fit, I don't have a specific number, but there's a limitation just based on the constraints of the site.
okay. Thank you, Ms. Marlin. I think to answer your last question, there's a similar question that I had before of, how the relationship going with the neighbor. I think, them necessarily not being at this one, I think is a testament to maybe how the relationship is going. Any further questions from the public? I don't see anybody else with their hand raised, and I didn't see anybody else registered. We will now close the public comment portion. I will acknowledge for the record that no e-comments were received for the case. So now we will call for a motion. Is there a motion for the case from the commissioners?
Mr. Commissioner, I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that, subject to certain conditions, the requested conditional use permit and associated development plan for the property located at 9109 Monaco Street, contained in case CU-121-19-21, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the conditional use permit subject to the following conditions. This approval applies to the development plan dated 7/1/2019 associated with this conditional use permit. This conditional use permit shall expire 5 years after the date of approval. The applicant shall be required to renew the conditional use permit prior to the expiration date in order to continue utilizing the site. The conditional use permit is granted only for the storage of dyed mulch chips, inbound recyclable wood product, soil mulching material stackers, and raw wood chips at a height of no greater than 25 feet. All other outdoor storage on the property must comply with all outdoor storage requirements that apply to a property zoned I2 as currently adopted or amended by the city. Any deviations from this condition will require an amendment to this application. All mulch piles shall be a minimum of 100 feet from the adjacent residential properties at any given time, measured from the property line. A minimum setback of 500 feet for grinding and screening operations shall apply from adjacent residential properties measured from the property line. Grinding operation will not occur on the site when the wind speeds exceed 15 miles per hour for a duration of at least 10 minutes. The applicant shall maintain a minimum of 8 feet high net on the east property boundary to prevent any wood chips from blowing into neighboring properties. The applicant shall maintain a 25-foot demarcation pole on the subject property in order to assist with ongoing compliance of the 25-foot high pile restriction. Primary drive Aisles of the outdoor storage area shall be paved with recycled asphalt and maintained by the applicant as indicated in the approved development plan in case D-255-14-15-16-19. Water trucks shall be kept and utilized on the site during business hours for the spraying of mulch piles and drive aisles. The property shall act in accordance with the dust control and mitigation plan included as Exhibit A. Due to the nature of the operations, the applicant will maintain the premises to be free of garbage, trash, and excessive wood chip debris at all times. The applicant shall comply with all federal, state, and local law.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is discussion amongst the group. Mr. Amador?
Yes, so for the board, I know that we have a motion and a second. I did have some concerns in terms of the 5-year renewal. But considering that we have no complaints so far and understanding about the clarification of the digging process of how far that hole really is, I'm okay with a 5-year conditional use renewal as outlined in the motion. Just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Amador. I would agree. I think that's a testament to A1 Organics from the feedback that we've heard from the community, which is important to us. And that was so crucial to the first time we heard this case. So I'm in agreement with you, Mr. Amador. I'll be voting in favor of the motion. Any further comment from the commissioners? Kim, can you please call a vote?
Commissioner Yost,
Yes.
Commissioner Ingram,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
and Chairman Popiel.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion has passed, 5 yeses. Thank you, Mr. Martinelli. Thank you, Matt. Thank you to A1 Organics for the presentation.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just say thanks for really doing what's right and working hard to put a good operation in our community to the applicant. Looks like they've gone above and beyond, doing what they were asked to do. I know they bought new equipment, and I've driven out there a couple times, over the last year, and they keep that place just spotlessly clean. It's just it's a nice operation. I'm glad that they're in Commerce City, personally.
Thank you, Mr. Kemick. That concludes our cases for this evening. We'll move on to some miscellaneous business. Any commission business that we need to discuss, Mr. Timms?
We just have our 2 new alternates in the audience tonight, so just wanted to acknowledge that. And let's let the commissioners know that we do, I believe, have 2 zoning cases for April. So we will have a meeting in April.
Okay. Welcome virtually hi to the alternates. So hopefully one day we'll get to meet in person. Welcome to the team.
Yeah.
Mr. Hayter, any legal business we need to cover?
I have nothing for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Any additional commission business we need to discuss from the commissioners? Thank you all. Have a great night. And we'll talk to you next time. Our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
See ya.
you.